August 15th, 1981. 12 young baseball players and their coach climbed onto a shiny private jet, ready to chase their dreams at the national championship. They were laughing, singing team songs, and planning how they would celebrate their victory. At 2:47 p.m., the plane took off from a small Ohio airport. At 3:23 p.m., it simply vanished into thin air. No wreckage, no distress call, no trace. For 19 long years, their families prayed, searched, and never stopped hoping. The boys who had captured America's heart were gone, lost somewhere over the endless Atlantic Ocean. Then, in the year 2000, a Navy diving team made an impossible discovery 800 feet underwater. They pulled up something that would change everything anyone thought they knew about that terrible day. But how could a piece of paper survive 19 years underwater? And why did the message inside suggest the boys might still be alive? The water was darker than midnight at 800 feet below the Atlantic Ocean. Commander Jake Morrison checked his diving equipment one more time before giving the signal to his team. They had been searching this part of the ocean floor for 3 weeks, looking for pieces of an old Navy submarine that went down in World War II. "Control, this is Morrison," Jake spoke into his radio. "We're beginning our descent to the target area." "Copy that, Commander. Weather looks good up here. You have 2 hours of dive time." Jake pushed himself down through the cold black water. His powerful lights cut through the darkness like yellow swords. Fish scattered as he moved deeper. The ocean floor came into view slowly, covered in sand and rocks that had been sitting there for hundreds of years. His diving partner, Petty Officer Lisa Garcia, swam beside him. They moved across the sandy bottom, their lights searching for anything that didn't belong. Old bottles, pieces of metal, even shoes sometimes washed up down here. But they were looking for something specific. "Commander, over here." Garcia's voice crackled through the radio. Jake swam toward her light. Garcia was hovering over something small and dark in the sand. As he got closer, Jake could see it was a baseball glove. An old one, made of brown leather that had turned almost black from being underwater. "That's weird," Garcia said. "What's a baseball glove doing way out here?" Jake carefully picked up the glove. It was heavy with water and covered in green algae. But something about it looked familiar. The shape was old-fashioned, not like the gloves kids use today. This one looked like it came from many years ago. "Let's bag it and take it up," Jake said. "Maybe someone lost it off a boat." Back on the surface, Jake and Garcia climbed onto their research ship, the USS Discovery. The sun felt warm on Jake's face after the cold darkness below. He pulled off his diving mask and shook the water from his short gray hair. "What did you find down there?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's scientist. Jake held up the waterlogged baseball glove. "Just this old glove. Looks like it's been down there for years." Dr. Kim took the glove and examined it carefully. "This is definitely vintage. I'd say 1970s or early 1980s based on the style." She turned it over in her hands. "Wait, there's something inside." Jake watched as Dr. Kim carefully opened the glove's pocket. Inside was a piece of paper, folded small and somehow still white despite being underwater. She unfolded it with gentle fingers. "This is impossible," Dr. Kim whispered. "This paper should have dissolved years ago." Jake leaned closer to read the handwritten note. The words were clear, written in blue ink that looked fresh. "We're not dead. We're waiting. Tell our families we love them." The Crimson Hawks, 1981. Jake felt his blood turn cold. He knew that name. Every person who lived on the East Coast in the 1980s knew that name. The Crimson Hawks were the youth baseball team that had vanished 19 years ago. 12 boys, their coach, and their pilot had disappeared without a trace while flying to a championship game in Florida. "Get me a phone," Jake said, his voice shaking. "I need to call the FBI." "Sir, what's wrong?" Garcia asked. "It's just An old baseball glove. Jake looked at the note again. The handwriting was neat and careful, like a child trying his best to write clearly. But how could paper survive underwater for 19 years? How could the ink still be so bright and clear? "Lisa, this glove belonged to the biggest mystery in sports history," Jake said. "Those boys disappeared in 1981. Their plane vanished, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. The Coast Guard searched for months and never found anything. Not a piece of the plane, not a life jacket, nothing." Dr. Kim was studying the note under a magnifying glass. "Commander, this paper isn't just preserved. It looks like it was written yesterday. The ink hasn't faded at all. The paper isn't even wrinkled." Jake's hands were shaking as he reached for the radio. He had served in the Navy for 25 years and had seen many strange things in the ocean. But this was different. This was impossible. "Control, this is Commander Morrison. I need you to patch me through to FBI headquarters in Washington. Tell them we found evidence related to the Crimson Hawks case." "Sir, did you say the Crimson Hawks? The missing baseball team?" "That's right. And tell them we're going to need Agent Sarah Chen. If she's still with the Bureau, she'll want to see this." Jake stared at the note again. 19 years those families had wondered what happened to their boys. 19 years of hoping and praying and never giving up. Now he held a message that seemed to come from beyond the impossible. The ocean kept its secrets well, but today it had given one back. Millbrook, Ohio, spring 1981. The crack of the bat echoed across the small baseball field as Tommy Brennan connected with a fastball. The 14-year-old watched the ball sail over the fence and grinned as his teammates cheered from the dugout. Tommy was the captain of the Crimson Hawks, and everyone in Millbrook knew he had the best arm in 3 counties. "That's my boy," shouted Elena Brennan from the stands. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, but she never missed Tommy's games. Baseball was the one thing that made her son's eyes light up, especially since his father had left them 2 years ago. Coach. Danny Rodriguez clapped his hands together. "Nice hit, Tommy. That's how we do it. Hawks." Danny was only 28, but he understood these boys better than anyone. He had played minor league baseball before a shoulder injury ended his dreams. Now he poured all his love for the game into coaching kids who reminded him of himself at their age. The Crimson Hawks were not supposed to be champions. They came from the poorest part of Millbrook, where most parents worked at the steel mill or the tire factory. Their uniforms were hand-me-downs. Their equipment was held together with tape and hope. But what they lacked in fancy gear, they made up for with heart. Miguel Santos stepped up to the plate next. At 13, he was the fastest runner anyone had ever seen. His grandmother had come to America from Mexico with nothing but dreams, and Miguel carried those dreams with him every time he ran the bases. "Vamos, Miguel!" his father shouted in Spanish from the bleachers. Miguel's whole family came to every game, bringing homemade tamales to share with other families. Behind Miguel in the batting order was Billy Crawford, the smallest kid on the team. At 12 years old, Billy was barely 5 feet tall, but he had the biggest heart. He proved every day that size didn't matter if you had enough fight in you. "Come on, Billy!" yelled Kevin Walsh from the dugout. Kevin was 11 and the team's biggest cheerleader. Even when he wasn't playing, he was always encouraging his teammates. His positive attitude kept everyone's spirits up, even during tough games. Marcus Johnson sat quietly in the corner of the dugout, studying the other team's pitcher. At 13, Marcus was the smartest player on the field. He could spot weaknesses in other teams that even Coach Rodriguez missed. Marcus didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. Little Robbie Martinez, the youngest player at only 10 years old, was everyone's favorite. The older boys treated him like their little brother, always making sure he felt included. Robbie's smile could light up the whole dugout, even when they were losing. Joey Palmer was the team clown. The 12-year-old could make his teammates laugh even in the most serious moments. His jokes and funny faces kept the team relaxed during pressure situations. Andy Foster struggled with a stutter when he talked, but on the baseball field, he spoke perfectly with his glove and bat. The 11-year-old found his voice through baseball in a way he never could with words. Timmy Chen, also 13, was the team's statistician. He kept track of every player's batting average, every pitcher's earned run average, and every game's important details in a notebook he carried everywhere. Timmy's older sister Sarah had just started working for the FBI, and she was so proud of her little brother's dedication to the team. Luke Harrison was the only kid on the team whose family had money, but he never acted like he was better than anyone else. The 12-year-old just wanted to belong somewhere, and the Crimson Hawks had become his real family. Sean Murphy was the gentle giant who played first base. At 14, he was the biggest kid on the team, but he was also the kindest. Sean looked out for the younger players and never let anyone pick on them. The newest member of the team was Alex Rivera, only 10 years old, but with natural talent that amazed everyone. Alex had just moved to Millbrook with his family, and joining the Hawks had helped him make friends in his new town. Together, these 12 boys had done something nobody thought was possible. They had won the Ohio State Championship, beating teams with better equipment, more money, and fancy coaches. They had proven that heart and teamwork could overcome anything. "Listen up, Hawks," Coach Rodriguez called the team together after practice. "I have some incredible news. Mr. Charles Whitmore, the businessman who owns the department store downtown, wants to fly us to the national tournament in Florida. He's offering to take us in his private jet." The boys erupted in cheers. Most of them had never been on any airplane, let alone a private jet. This was the chance of a lifetime. "We're really going to nationals, Coach?" asked little Robbie, his eyes wide with excitement. "That's right, son. We're going to show the whole country what the Crimson Hawks are made of." Tommy Brennan looked around at his teammates. These weren't just players to him. They were his brothers. Together, they had turned a group of misfits into champions. Now they were going to fly to Florida like real professionals. Hawks forever. Tommy shouted, and the whole team joined in their battle cry. None of them could have imagined that in just a few weeks, they would board that private jet and fly into the greatest mystery in sports history. All they knew was that they were living their dreams, and nothing could stop them now. The Crimson Hawks had captured the hearts of everyone in Millbrook. Soon, they would capture the hearts of the entire nation, though not in the way anyone expected. August 15th, 1981, Millbrook Regional Airport. The morning sun sparkled off the white wings of Charles Whitmore's private jet as it sat on the small runway. Tommy Brennan had never seen anything so beautiful. The sleek aircraft looked like something from a movie with its curved windows and shiny metal body. "Would you look at that?" whispered Miguel Santos, clutching his duffel bag tighter. "We're really going to fly in that?" The 12 boys of the Crimson Hawks stood together on the tarmac, their eyes wide with wonder. They wore their best clothes, not their uniforms. Coach Rodriguez had told them to dress nicely for the flight, like real professionals. "Stay together, boys," Coach Rodriguez called out. "And remember your manners. Mr. Whitmore is being very generous." Charles Whitmore walked toward them with a big smile. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He owned the biggest department store in town and had always supported local sports teams. "Welcome, champions," Mr. Whitmore said, shaking hands with each boy. "Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime?" "Yes, sir," the boys shouted together. Behind them, families gathered to say goodbye. Elena Brennan hugged her son Tommy tight, trying not to cry. She had packed his lucky socks and his favorite snacks for the trip. "You play your heart out, mijo," she whispered in his ear. "And don't forget to call me when you get there." "I will, Mom, I promise." Miguel's grandmother pressed a small wooden cross into his hand. "Para protection," she said, in Spanish. For protection. Little Robbie Martinez's parents took pictures with an old camera. They wanted to remember this moment forever. Their 10-year-old son was going to play baseball in the national championship. It felt like a dream. Stick with the older boys, his mother told him, and brush your teeth every night. I will, Mama. Don't worry about me. Coach Rodriguez walked among the families, shaking hands and promising to take good care of their sons. At 28, he felt the weight of responsibility. These weren't just players to him. They were like his own children. We'll bring home that trophy, he told the parents. These boys are going to make you proud. The pilot, Robert Ace Turner, finished his walk-around inspection of the aircraft. Ace was a veteran pilot with 20 years of experience flying everything from small planes to big jets. He had flown Mr. Whitmore's plane dozens of times without a single problem. Beautiful day for flying, Ace said to Coach Rodriguez. Clear skies all the way to Florida. Should be a smooth ride. That's good to hear. Some of the boys have never flown before. Don't worry, Coach. I'll take good care of them. Inside the plane, the boys couldn't believe their eyes. The seats were made of soft leather and were bigger than the chairs in their living rooms. There were tables where they could play cards or read. The windows were huge, giving them perfect views of the sky. This is fancier than my house, joked Joey Palmer, making everyone laugh. Tommy Brennan pulled out his diary and started writing. He always wrote about important moments in his life, and this was the most important day ever. August 15th, 1981. This is the best day of my life. We're about to fly to Florida in a real private jet. I can't believe this is happening to us. Mom looked so proud when she said goodbye. I'm going to win this championship for her, for all our families, and for Millbrook. The Crimson Hawks are going to show everyone what we're made of. Miguel Santos called his grandmother from the phone on the plane. It was the first time he had ever used a phone that wasn't attached to the wall. Abuela, we're about to take off. The plane is so fancy. I wish you could see it. Play with honor, Miguel. Make our family proud. I will, Abuela. I love you. Little Robbie Martinez drew a picture on a napkin. It showed their plane flying through clouds that looked like baseballs. He wanted to give it to his parents when he got home, along with the championship trophy. At 2:30 p.m., Ace Turner started the engines. The plane hummed with power, and the boys felt in their stomachs flutter with excitement. Coach Rodriguez made sure everyone had their seatbelts on. This is it, Hawks, he said. Next stop, Florida. The families waved from the terminal windows as the plane slowly moved toward the runway. Elena Brennan pressed her hand against the glass, watching her son's dream come true. At 2:47 p.m., the plane lifted off from Millbrook Regional Airport. The boys cheered as they rose into the blue sky. Below them, their hometown grew smaller and smaller until it looked like a toy model. Look how tiny everything looks, said Kevin Walsh, pressing his face against the window. The boys sang their team song as Ohio disappeared beneath them. They talked about the games they would play, the teams they would beat, and the trophy they would bring home. The future had never looked brighter. At 3:15 p.m., they were flying over Pennsylvania. The plane was steady and smooth, just as Ace had promised. The boys were relaxed now, some playing cards, others looking out the windows at the clouds below. At 3:20 p.m., Ace Turner noticed something strange on his instruments. There was a bright light ahead of them, getting bigger and brighter. It wasn't another plane or a storm cloud. It was something he had never seen before. What is that? He muttered to himself. At 3:23 p.m., the light surrounded their plane completely. It was the most beautiful blue color any of them had ever seen. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The boys looked at each other with wonder, not fear. Then everything changed. The last radio transmission from the plane was Ace Turner's voice. "Control, we're seeing some kind of, it's beautiful, it's..." Then, silence. By 4 p.m., when the plane failed to check in, the Coast Guard was called. By 6 p.m., search planes were in the air. By midnight, the biggest search and rescue operation in Coast Guard history was underway. But they would find nothing. No wreckage, no life preservers, no trace of the plane or the 14 souls aboard. The Crimson Hawks had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only questions, grief, and the greatest mystery in sports history. In Millbrook, families waited, by their phones for news that would never come. The boys who had captured everyone's hearts were gone, leaving behind only memories and an impossible hope that somehow, somewhere, they were still alive. August 16th, 1981, one day after the disappearance. Elena. Brennan hadn't slept in 24 hours. She sat by her kitchen table, staring at the phone, willing it to ring with good news. Her coffee had grown cold hours ago, but she didn't notice. All she could think about was Tommy's last words to her. "I will, Mom. I promise." The doorbell rang, and Elena's heart jumped. Maybe it was news. Maybe they had found the boys. She rushed to the door and found her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, holding a plate of food. "Elena, honey, you need to eat something," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "You can't help Tommy if you don't take care of yourself." "I can't eat," Elena whispered. "Not until I know he's safe." Across town, Miguel's father, Roberto Santos, was at the Coast Guard station for the third time that day. He had taken time off from his job at the steel mill to join the search boats. His wife, Maria, begged him to come home and rest, but he couldn't stop looking. "Sir, we've covered over 1,000 square miles of ocean," Lieutenant Commander Williams told him. "We have 12 ships, 6 helicopters, and 3 planes searching. Around the clock." "But you haven't found anything?" Roberto asked, his voice breaking. "Not yet. But we're not giving up. We'll keep searching until we find them." At FBI headquarters in Cleveland, 22-year-old Agent Sarah Chen was assigned to help with the investigation. It was only her second week on the job, and she had never worked on anything this big. When she heard that one of the missing boys was named Timmy Chen, her hands started shaking. "Agent Chen, are you all right?" asked her supervisor, Agent Morrison. "The boy, Timmy Chen, he's my little brother." "Agent." Morrison's face went pale. "Sarah, you can't work this case. It's too personal." "Please, sir, I need to help find him. I promise I'll stay professional." After a long pause, Agent Morrison nodded. "Okay, but you're working with me, and if it gets too hard, you step back." Sarah drove to Millbrook that afternoon. The small town looked like it was in mourning. Flags flew at half-mast. The baseball field where the Crimson Hawks had practiced was covered with flowers, teddy bears, and signs that read, "Bring our boys home." At the Chen family house, Sarah found her parents sitting in silence in their living room. Her mother's eyes were red from crying. Her father just stared out the window, as if he could will Timmy to walk through the door. "Any news?" her mother asked hopefully when Sarah walked in. "Not yet, Mom, but the Coast Guard is doing everything they can." "He's so young," her mother sobbed. "Only 13 years old. He was so excited about the trip. He packed his lucky baseball cap and his statistics notebook." Sarah hugged her mother tight. She had to be strong for her family, but inside, her heart was breaking. Timmy was her baby brother. She had taught him how to ride a bike, helped him with his homework, and promised to protect him always. The search continued for days, then weeks. Charles Whitmore, the businessman who owned the plane, was devastated. He blamed himself for offering the flight. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and spent every day at the search headquarters. "This is my fault," he told anyone who would listen. "I should have checked the weather better. I should have used a different pilot. I should have. Mr. Whitmore, this isn't your fault, Lieutenant Commander Williams assured him. Ace Turner was one of the best pilots on the East Coast. Your plane was inspected just last month. Sometimes bad things just happen. But Charles Whitmore couldn't accept that. He started spending his own money to hire private search teams. He brought in experts from around the world. He offered $1 million reward for any information about the missing plane. Theories began to emerge from everywhere. Some people thought the plane had crashed into the ocean and sunk too deep to find. Others believed it might have been hijacked by criminals who wanted to kidnap the wealthy businessman's plane. A few even suggested that aliens had taken the plane, though most people laughed at that idea. Psychics called from all over the country, claiming they had visions of the boys. One woman from California said she saw them on a tropical island. A man from Texas insisted they were being held in a secret underground base. The FBI had to investigate every lead, no matter how strange it sounded. We're getting hundreds of tips every day, Agent Morrison told Sarah. Most of them are from well-meaning people who just want to help. But we have to check them all. The families of the Crimson Hawks refused to give up hope. Elena Brennan organized daily prayer vigils at the Catholic Church. Roberto Santos led search boats on weekends, using his own money for gas. The parents formed a support group meeting every evening to share information and comfort each other. Our boys are fighters, Elena told the group one night. They didn't win the state championship by giving up. They're alive somewhere, and they're waiting for us to find them. Little Robbie Martinez's mother, Carmen, nodded through her tears. Robbie is so small, but he's brave. If anyone can survive, it's our boys. The media attention was overwhelming. Reporters came from all over the country to cover the story. The missing Crimson Hawks became front-page news. Their pictures were on television every night. America fell in love with these brave boys who had overcome so much to reach their dreams. But as the weeks turned into months, hope began to fade for everyone except the families. The Coast Guard called off the official search after 60 days. The FBI classified the case as unsolved. Insurance companies declared the plane and its passengers legally dead. We can't stop looking, Elena Brennan told a reporter. These aren't just numbers or statistics. These are our children. Tommy is my whole world. Until someone shows me proof that he's gone, I'll never stop believing he's coming home. Agent Sarah Chen requested to stay on the case even after it was officially closed. She kept a file on her desk with pictures of all 12 boys and their coach. Every few months, she would review the evidence, hoping to find something everyone else had missed. They're out there somewhere, she told Agent Morrison. I can feel it. My brother is trying to tell me something, but I just can't hear him yet. The first anniversary came and went. The second anniversary brought fewer reporters and less attention. But in Millbrook, the families never forgot. They kept their sons' rooms exactly as they had left them. They celebrated birthdays with empty chairs at the table. They held on to hope when everyone else had moved on. Charles Whitmore became a recluse, living alone in his big house, surrounded by maps and files and desperate theories about what happened to his plane. He hired private investigators from around the world, spending millions of dollars on equipment and searches that led nowhere. The Crimson Hawks had broken the hearts of everyone who loved them. But their families refused to let those hearts stay broken. Love was stronger than grief. Hope was stronger than despair. And somewhere in the vast ocean, 12 boys and their coach were waiting to be found. The greatest mystery in sports history was just beginning. Millbrook, Ohio, 1985 to 1995. 4 years had passed since the Crimson Hawks vanished, but Elena Brennan still set 3 plates on her dinner table every night. One for herself, one for her daughter, Maria, who had been born 2 years after Tommy disappeared, and one for Tommy. She couldn't help herself. In her heart, her 14-year-old son was still coming home from baseball practice, hungry and full of stories about his game. "Mama, why do you always put out the extra plate?" 4-year-old Maria asked one evening. Elena looked at her daughter, who had Tommy's dark eyes and bright smile. "That's for your big brother. He's going to come home someday and I want to be ready." Maria nodded seriously. She had grown up, hearing stories about the brother she had never met. In her bedroom, she had a picture of Tommy in his Crimson Hawks uniform. Elena told her every night that Tommy was the best big brother in the world and that he would love her so much when he came home. Across town, the Santos family was falling apart. Roberto had quit his job at the steel mill 2 years earlier to spend all his time searching for Miguel. He had used up their savings hiring boats and private investigators. Maria Santos worked 3 jobs to pay the bills, but the stress was too much. "We have to let him go, Roberto," Maria said one night, tears streaming down her face. "We have other children who need us. Carmen and little Luis need their father here, not chasing ghosts in the ocean." "He's not a ghost," Roberto shouted. "Miguel is my son, and I will never stop looking for him. Then you'll lose the rest of your family too." 6 months later, Maria Santos filed for divorce. She moved to her sister's house in Cleveland, with Carmen and Luis, leaving Roberto alone with his maps and his empty hope. Billy Crawford's little sister, Jennifer, grew up feeling like she could never be good enough. At school, teachers would say, "Oh, you're Billy's sister. He was such a special boy." At home, her parents' conversations always seemed to drift back to their missing son. "I wish I had met Billy," Jennifer told her mother when she turned 12, the same age Billy had been when he disappeared. "You would have loved him, honey. He was so brave and funny. He would have protected you from everything." Jennifer tried out for the softball team, hoping to make her parents proud the way Billy had. But when she struck out during her first game, she saw her father's disappointed face in the stands. She quit the team the next day. "I'm not Billy," she whispered to herself. "I'll never be Billy." Agent Sarah Chen had built her entire career around finding missing children. Now 31 years old, she had solved dozens of cases that other agents had given up on. She had a reputation for never quitting, for following every lead, no matter how small. But the case that mattered most remained unsolved. Every few months, Sarah would drive to Millbrook and visit her parents. They had aged so much in the past decade. Her father's hair had turned completely gray. Her mother had developed a nervous habit of checking locks and looking out windows, as if she was still waiting for Timmy to come home. "Any new leads on the boys?" her mother would ask hopefully every time. "I'm still working on it, Mom. I haven't given up." The truth was, Sarah had hit a dead end years ago. She had interviewed everyone connected to the case dozens of times. She had studied weather patterns, ocean currents, and flight paths until she could recite them in her sleep. But there was simply no evidence to follow. In her FBI office, Sarah kept a wall covered with pictures of all 12 boys. Under each photo, she had written their dreams. Tommy wanted to play for the Cleveland Indians. Miguel wanted to run in the Olympics. Billy wanted to be a police officer. She read their dreams every morning to remind herself why she couldn't give up. The town of Millbrook had tried to move on, but the memory of the Crimson Hawks was everywhere. The baseball field where they had practiced was now called Crimson Hawks Memorial Field. Every year on August 15th, the anniversary of their disappearance, the whole town gathered for a memorial service. But the new youth baseball teams struggled to fill the Hawks' legacy. Kids felt the pressure of trying to live up to the boys who had become legends. Parents were afraid to let their children travel to tournaments. The joy had gone out of the game. "It's like playing in a graveyard," one young player told his coach. "Everyone expects us to be as good as the Hawks, but they were special. We're just regular kids." Coach Danny Rodriguez's replacement, Mr. Patterson, tried his best, but he could never capture the magic that Danny had created. The new teams won some games and lost others, but they never captured hearts the way the original Crimson Hawks. Adegi Charles Whitmore had become a completely different person. The successful businessman was now a pale, thin man who rarely left his mansion. His house was filled with filing cabinets stuffed with reports from private investigators, psychics, and conspiracy theorists. He had spent over $5 million searching for the plane. He had hired deep-sea exploration teams to scan the UD ocean floor. He had consulted with experts on everything from pilot error to alien abduction. His friends and family begged him to stop, but he couldn't let go. "They're out there," he would tell anyone who visited. "I feel responsible for those boys. I offered them that flight. I have to find them." The families of the other boys dealt with their grief in different ways. Some, like Elena Brennan, never stopped believing their sons would return. Others tried to move forward while keeping their memories alive. A few, like the Santos family, were torn apart by the endless uncertainty. Kevin Walsh's parents started a charity that helped other families of missing children. They used their pain to help others, turning their loss into something meaningful. Marcus. Johnson's mother became a therapist who specialized in helping children deal with trauma and loss. She said that losing Marcus had taught her how precious and fragile childhood really was. Sean Murphy's parents moved to Florida, saying they couldn't bear to live in a place with so many sad memories, but they sent money every year to maintain the memorial field. By 1995, 14 years after the disappearance, most people assumed the Crimson Hawks were gone forever. The case was discussed in FBI training classes as an example of a perfect mystery. A case with no evidence, no witnesses, and no logical explanation. But some people never gave up hope. Elena Brennan still set that extra plate every night. Agent Sarah Chen still reviewed the case files every few months. Charles Whitmore still funded searches in remote parts of the ocean. And in her heart, Elena knew something that she couldn't explain to anyone else. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet, she could swear she heard the sound of a baseball hitting a glove in the backyard. When she looked out the window, there was nothing there. But she knew somehow that Tommy was trying to tell her he was okay. The mystery had shaped a generation. Children who had been babies when the Hawks disappeared were now teenagers. They had grown up with the story, and it had become part of who they were. In Millbrook, everyone knew that some questions didn't have answers, and some goodbyes were never really final. The Crimson Hawks lived on in memory, in hope, and in the unshakable belief that love was stronger than loss. Their story had become legend, but for the people who loved them, they were still just 12 boys who had gone to play baseball and never came home. August 2000, 19 years later. Agent Sarah Chen was 41 now, with silver threads in her black hair and lines around her eyes from years of studying case files. She stood in the FBI laboratory, staring at the impossible baseball glove that Commander Morrison had pulled from the ocean. The note inside had been analyzed by the best forensic experts in the country, and every test came back with the same shocking result. The paper is from 1981, Dr. Michael Foster, the FBI's chief forensic scientist, told her. The ink is from a standard blue ballpoint pen that was common in the early 1980s. But here's what doesn't make sense, Agent Chen. The paper shows no signs of aging, none at all. Sarah picked up the evidence bag containing the note. Through the clear plastic, she could read the words that had haunted her for weeks. "We're not dead. We're waiting. Tell our families we love them." The Crimson Hawks, 1981. Could the salt water have preserved it somehow? Sarah asked. Absolutely not. Paper dissolves in salt water within days, sometimes hours. This note should have been gone 18 years ago, but look at this under the microscope. Dr. Foster showed Sarah the note under high magnification. The fibers of the paper looked fresh and new. The ink was bright and clear, as if someone had written it yesterday. It's like time stopped for this piece of paper, Dr. Foster said quietly. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of forensic work. Sarah's phone rang. It was Commander Morrison calling from his ship. "Agent Chen, you need to get down here right away. We found something else." 2 hours later, Sarah was on a Coast Guard helicopter flying out to the USS Discovery. The ocean stretched endlessly below her, blue and mysterious. Somewhere down there, her brother Timmy had disappeared 19 years ago. Now, impossibly, he seemed to be sending her a message. Commander Morrison met her as the helicopter landed on the ship's deck. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly. "Agent Chen, I've been in the Navy for 25 years. I've seen a lot of strange things in the ocean, but this is beyond anything I can explain." He led her to the ship's laboratory, where the original baseball glove sat in a special container. But now there was something else, a second piece of evidence that had been found just that morning. "We went back to the exact spot where we found the glove," Commander Morrison explained. "My team wanted to see if there was anything else down there. They found this buried in the sand about 50 feet away." Sarah stared at the new discovery. It was a baseball, old and waterlogged but still recognizable. Written on it in faded marker were the words, "Crimson Hawks State Champions 1981, and below, that 12 signatures. "I can see Tommy Brennan's signature here," Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. "And Miguel Santos, and this one, this is my brother's handwriting. Timmy always made his T with that little curve at the top." Dr. Kim, the ship's scientist, had been studying the baseball all morning. "Agent Chen, this ball shows normal. Signs of being underwater for many years. The leather is deteriorated, the stitching is loose, and the signatures are badly faded. But here's what's strange. Based on the rate of deterioration, this ball has been underwater for about 5 years, not 19. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. 5 years? That would mean someone threw this ball into the ocean in 1995, 14 years after the plane disappeared. Sarah's mind raced. Either someone was playing an elaborate hoax or something impossible was happening. She thought about all the evidence, the perfectly preserved note, the normally deteriorated baseball, and the strange circumstances of both discoveries. "Commander, I need to speak with the families. If someone is playing games with this case, they've crossed a line. But if this is real, Agent Chen, then we're dealing with something that challenges everything we know about how the world works." That evening, Sarah drove to Millbrook for the first time in 2 years. The town looked smaller than she remembered, and older. Many of the buildings needed paint, and several stores had closed down. But the baseball field still looked perfect, with its memorial plaques and carefully maintained grass. Her first stop was Elena Brennan's house. At 67, Elena was frailer than Sarah remembered, but her eyes still held the same fierce hope they had carried for 19 years. "Agent Chen," Elena said, opening the door with a smile. "What brings you here?" "Is there news about the boys?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Elena a photo of the baseball glove. Elena's hand flew to her mouth and tears immediately filled her eyes. "That's Tommy's glove. I sewed that red thread myself when the webbing tore. Where did you find it?" "In the Atlantic Ocean, Mrs. Brennan, along with this." Sarah showed her the note. Elena read it 3 times before she spoke. "He's alive," she whispered. "I knew it. I've always known it. Tommy is alive, and he's trying to tell us something." "Mrs. Brennan, I need to ask you something important. Have you ever seen this handwriting before? Does it look like Tommy wrote this recently, or does it look like his writing from when he was 14? Elena studied the note carefully. "This is how Tommy wrote when he was young. He always made his letters very neat and careful. But Agent Chen, there's something else. Look at the way. He wrote, 'Love.' See that little heart he drew over the I instead of a dot? He only did that when he was writing something very important to him." Sarah felt chills run down her spine. Either someone had studied Tommy's handwriting with incredible detail, or Tommy himself had written this note. But that was impossible, wasn't it? Her next stop was Charles Whitmore's mansion. The once successful businessman had become a hermit, living alone with his obsession. When Sarah rang his doorbell, it took several minutes for him to answer. Charles looked like he had aged 30 years instead of 19. His hair was completely white, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes had the distant look of someone who had spent too much time alone with impossible thoughts. "Agent Chen? What are you doing here? Have you found them? Have you found my boys?" Sarah showed him the evidence. Charles examined everything with shaking hands, and then he began to cry. "I knew they weren't dead," he sobbed. "I've spent every day for 19 years believing they were still out there. Everyone said I was crazy, but I knew. I could feel it." "Mr. Whitmore, has anyone contacted you recently about the case? Any new tips or theories?" "No, nothing new. But Agent Chen, I have something to show you, something I've never shared with anyone." Charles led her to his study, which was filled with maps, charts, and photographs. He pulled out a folder marked "Classified Personal." "The day the boys disappeared, I was in contact with the plane until the very end. The last thing, Ace Turner said to me was that they were seeing some kind of beautiful blue light. The FA told me to keep that information private, but I've never forgotten it." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Blue light? What kind of blue light?" Ace said it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Then the radio went dead. I've spent millions of dollars trying to figure out what that light could have been. Weather, phenomena, military experiments, natural gas releases from the ocean floor. Nothing explains it. As Sarah drove back to Cleveland that night, her mind was spinning with possibilities. Every piece of evidence pointed in impossible directions. The preserved note suggested the boys were alive and somehow outside normal time. The deteriorated baseball suggested someone had access to their belongings years after they disappeared. But the most disturbing possibility was also the most hopeful one. What if the boys really were alive somewhere? What if they had found a way to send messages across an impossible distance? What if love really was stronger than death and hope was stronger than logic? Sarah pulled into her driveway and sat in her car for a long time, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, her little brother might be waiting for her to solve the greatest mystery of her life. She had spent 19 years believing he was gone. Now, for the first time since 1981, she allowed herself to believe he might be coming home. September 2000, 1 month after the discovery. Agent Sarah Chen spread the ocean maps across her desk like pieces of a giant puzzle. Red pins marked every search location from 1981. Blue pins showed where the baseball glove and ball had been found, but it was the green pins that made her heart race. Those marked the impossible places where ocean currents could never have carried objects from a plane crash. "The evidence doesn't make sense," she said to Commander Morrison, who had driven up from the coast to meet with her. "If the plane went down at the last known location, these items should have drifted southeast with the Gulf Stream. Instead, they were found 200 miles northwest." Commander Morrison studied the map. It's like they were placed there deliberately. But by who, and how did they get into the ocean? Sarah had been thinking about that question for weeks. She had a theory that scared her, but it was the only explanation that fit all the evidence. What if they didn't drift there? What if someone put them there? Someone who's been missing for 19 years? I know how it sounds. But what if the boys found a way to send us messages? What if they're alive somewhere and trying to tell us where they are? Commander Morrison was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Agent Chen, I've seen a lot of strange things in the ocean. Ships that disappear without a trace, lights under the water that can't be explained, sounds that don't match any known sea life. The ocean keeps secrets that we can't understand. Maybe it's time we stopped looking for logical explanations. Sarah's next call was to Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a quantum physicist at MIT who specialized in studying unusual phenomena. Dr. Warren had written papers about time distortions and parallel dimensions that most scientists thought were science fiction. But Sarah was running out of normal explanations. Dr. Warren, this is Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI. I have a case that involves some unusual physical evidence, and I was hoping you could help me understand what might be possible. I'm listening. Agent Chen, Sarah described the preserved note and the timeline discrepancies. Dr. Warren was silent for so long that Sarah wondered if the call had been disconnected. Agent Chen, Dr. Warren finally said, what you're describing sounds like temporal displacement. Under very specific atmospheric conditions, it's theoretically possible for pockets of space-time to become unstable. What does that mean in simple terms? It means that time might move differently in some places. A minute in one location could be an hour somewhere else, or a year, or a decade. If someone were caught in such a temporal field, they might experience time very differently than the rest of us. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Could something like that happen over the ocean? There are certain areas where the magnetic field is unusually strong. The electromagnetic radiation from storms, combined with underwater mineral deposits, could theoretically create what we call temporal anomalies. Most scientists dismiss the idea, but the math supports it. Dr. Warren, if this were real, how would we find such a place? You'd look for patterns, unusual electromagnetic readings, ships or planes that have reported strange phenomena, areas where compasses spin wildly or radio signals fail, and you'd look for the same general location where multiple unexplained incidents have occurred over time. After the call, Sarah spent the rest of the day researching maritime mysteries. She found reports dating back to the 1800s of ships disappearing in the same general area where the Crimson Hawks had vanished. Pilots reported strange blue lights in the sky. Fishermen talked about areas where their equipment would stop working. The most promising lead came from an unexpected source. Martha Hendricks, now 78 years old, had been the lighthouse keeper on Stone Point Island in 1981. According to her file, she had reported seeing a bright blue flash over the ocean on August 15, 1981, at exactly 3:23 p.m. Her report had been dismissed because she was known for telling strange stories. Sarah drove to the Sunset Manor nursing home where Martha now lived. The old woman was sitting in the garden, feeding birds with shaking hands. Her gray hair was thin and her eyes looked confused most of the time. But when Sarah mentioned the blue light, Martha's face became sharp and focused. "You're the first person who's believed me," Martha said. "Everyone thought I was crazy, but I know what I saw that day." "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" "Mrs. Hendricks?" Martha closed her eyes and spoke slowly, as if she was watching the memory play in her mind. "It was a beautiful afternoon. Clear skies, calm seas. I was up in the lighthouse, cleaning the lens, when I saw this plane flying overhead. It was white and sleek, not like the big commercial jets." "What happened next?" "There was this light. It started small, like a star in the daytime, but it grew bigger and brighter until it was like looking into the sun. The most beautiful blue color I've ever seen. It was perfectly round, maybe a mile across." Sarah leaned forward. "What did the light do?" "It swallowed the plane," Martha said simply. "1 second the plane was there, flying normal. The next second, this blue circle was around it. Then the light got brighter and brighter until I had to look away. When I looked back, everything was gone. The plane, the light, everything." "How long did this last?" "Maybe 30 seconds. But here's the strange part, dear. After the light disappeared, the water below was perfectly calm. Too calm, like glass. And there was this pattern on the surface like ripples, but they were arranged in a perfect circle." Sarah's hands were shaking as she took notes. "Mrs. Hendricks, Did you report the exact location where you saw this? Of course I did. I gave them the coordinates. But they said I was seeing things. They said old lighthouse keepers always tell wild stories. Martha reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. I kept this all these years. I wrote down everything I saw with the exact time and location. I knew someday someone would believe me. Sarah looked at the coordinates Martha had written in faded ink. Her heart nearly stopped. They were exactly where Commander Morrison's team had found the baseball glove and ball. Mrs. Hendricks, this is incredibly important. Have you ever seen anything like that blue light before or since? Oh, yes, dear. It comes back every few years, always in the same spot. The last time was about 5 years ago. I was visiting my daughter, and we were having a picnic on the beach. Suddenly, there was that blue light again, but smaller this time. It only lasted a few seconds, and then something small splashed into the water. 5 years ago, the same time the baseball would have been thrown into the ocean based on its deterioration. Sarah felt like all the pieces of an impossible puzzle were finally starting to fit together. She drove back to Cleveland with Martha's notebook clutched in her hands, her mind racing with possibilities. That night, she called Commander Morrison with a proposal that would either solve the greatest mystery in sports history or prove that she had lost her mind. Commander, I want to go to those coordinates. I want to dive down to the exact spot where we found the evidence and see what's really down there. Agent Chen, we've already searched that area thoroughly. Not for what I'm looking for. Mrs. Hendricks described a perfect circle on the ocean floor after the light disappeared. What if that circle is still there? What if it's some kind of doorway? Commander Morrison was quiet for a long time. Agent Chen, if you're right about this, we're not just looking for missing persons anymore. We're looking for something that could change our understanding of reality itself. I know. But those boys are counting on us. My brother is counting. On me. We have to try. All right. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. I'm bringing every piece of advanced equipment the Navy has. If there's something strange down there, we're going to find it. Sarah hung up the phone and looked at the photo of Timmy she kept on her desk. He was 13 in the picture, grinning and holding his statistics notebook. For 19 years, she had believed that smile was gone forever. Now, for the first time, she dared to hope that she might see it again. October 2000, 2 weeks later. The USS Discovery sat motionless on the calm Atlantic Ocean, directly over the coordinates. Martha. Hendricks had written in her faded notebook 19 years ago. Agent Sarah Chen stood on the deck, watching the Navy's most advanced sonar equipment scan the ocean floor, 800 feet below. Agent Chen, you need to see this, called Dr. Kim, staring at her computer screen with wide eyes. Sarah hurried over to look at the sonar display. Instead of the normal rocky, sandy bottom they expected, the screen showed something that made no sense. There was a perfect circle on the ocean floor, exactly 300 feet across. The edges were so precise, they looked like they had been drawn with a compass. That's impossible, Commander Morrison said, studying the readings. Nature doesn't make perfect circles like that. Look at this, Dr. Kim pointed to another part of the screen. The material inside the circle is different from everything around it. It's giving off some kind of energy signature. My instruments are picking up electromagnetic readings unlike anything I've ever seen. Sarah felt her heart pounding. What kind of material could do that? I don't know. It's not showing up as rock, sand, or metal. It's almost like crystal, but with properties that shouldn't exist. Commander Morrison made the decision they all knew was coming. I'm going down. There myself. We need to see what this thing actually is. I'm going with you, Sarah said immediately. Agent Chen, you're not trained for deep sea diving at this depth. Commander, my brother is down there somewhere. I've waited 19 years for this moment. I'm not staying on the surface now. After 2 hours of preparation, Sarah found herself in a diving suit, descending through the dark water alongside Commander Morrison and his most experienced diver, Petty Officer Garcia. Powerful lights cut through the blackness as they dropped deeper and deeper. At 700 feet, Sarah's instruments began acting strangely. Her compass spun wildly. The radio crackled with static. Her depth gauge flickered between different readings. "Control, we're experiencing equipment malfunctions," Commander Morrison reported. "All instruments are going crazy down here." "Copy. That, Commander. We're seeing the same readings on our end. Whatever's down there is putting out massive electromagnetic interference." At 800 feet, they reached the ocean floor. Sarah's lights illuminated the sandy bottom, and then she saw it. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. The perfect circle Martha had described was real. But it wasn't just a mark on the ocean floor. It was a structure made of some kind of blue-green crystal that pulsed with its own inner light. The crystal formations rose from the seafloor in geometric patterns that hurt to look at, like they existed, in more dimensions than the human eye could process. "My God," Commander Morrison whispered into his radio. "Control, are you seeing this through our cameras?" "Affirmative, Commander. We have no idea what we're looking at." Sarah swam closer to the crystal structure. As she approached, the blue light grew brighter, and she began to hear something that made her heart stop. It was faint, distorted by the water and distance, but unmistakable, the sound of children laughing and playing. "Commander, are you hearing that?" "I hear it too, Agent Chen. It sounds like kids playing baseball." The crystal structure began to pulse faster as Sarah got within 50 feet of it. Suddenly, her radio filled with a voice she hadn't heard in 19 years. "Sarah? Sarah? Is that you?" Sarah's vision blurred with tears inside her diving mask. It was Timmy's voice, older, but unmistakably her little brother. "Timmy? Timmy, where are you?" "I'm here, Sarah. We're all here. We've been waiting for someone to find us." Commander Morrison swam up beside Sarah, his face pale behind his mask. "Agent Chen, this is impossible. Those boys disappeared 19 years ago." "I know how long it's been, Commander, but that's my brother's voice." The crystal formation suddenly erupted with brilliant blue light. The water around them began to swirl, but not violently. It was gentle, like being inside a giant, slowly spinning bubble. And through the swirling water and light, Sarah saw something that changed everything she thought she knew about reality. She saw grass. Green, perfect grass under a clear blue sky. She saw a baseball diamond with bases that gleamed white in eternal sunshine. And running between those bases, wearing the red uniforms of the Crimson Hawks, were 12 boys who hadn't aged a single day since 1981. Tommy Brennan stood at home plate, his bat resting on his shoulder, grinning the same 14-year-old grin his mother saw in her dreams every night. Miguel Santos was running the bases with the same speed and joy that had amazed crowds 19 years ago. Little Robbie Martinez was playing catch with Sean Murphy, laughing as the ball sailed back and forth between them. And there, keeping statistics in a notebook just like always, was Timmy Chen. 13 years old, exactly as Sarah remembered. Him, but somehow also wiser, more peaceful than any child should be. Timmy looked directly at Sarah through the swirling barrier between worlds. He walked toward the crystal boundary, and Sarah swam toward him. When they were only inches apart, separated by something that might have been water or light or time itself, Timmy placed his hand against the barrier. Sarah pressed her gloved hand against the same spot. She could feel warmth through the diving suit, warmth that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with love. "Sarah, we're okay," Timmy said, his voice clear now despite the impossible distance. "We're more than okay. We're in a place where the game never has to end, where no one gets hurt, and where we can be kids forever. But Timmy, we've missed you so much. Mom and Dad, they've been waiting for you to come home. I know. We've been watching. We've been trying to send messages, but it's hard to reach your world from here. The baseball glove was Tommy's idea. He said Mom would recognize it if you found it." Coach Rodriguez appeared behind Timmy, looking exactly as he had at 28. "Agent Chen, tell the families we're safe. Tell them we're playing the greatest games of our lives against teams of kids from throughout history. We've learned from Babe Ruth's childhood team, played against Lou Gehrig when he was 12. This is paradise for boys who love baseball." "But why can't you come home?" Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face inside her mask. "We can, Tommy," Brennan said, stepping up beside Timmy. "But only if we all choose to. And if we come back, we become the age we should be now. We become adults. We'll never be kids again, never have this perfect game again." Sarah understood. They weren't trapped. They were choosing to stay in a place where childhood lasted forever, where dreams never had to end, where the pure joy of playing ball could continue for eternity. But they were also choosing to stay away from the families who loved them more than life itself. The blue light began to fade slightly, and Sarah knew their time was running short. "Timmy, what do you want me to tell Mom and Dad?" "Tell them I love them. Tell them I think about them every day. And tell them that when we're ready, when we've played every game we've dreamed of playing, we'll come home." "But Sarah." "Yes. Tell them it has to be our choice. All of us, together. We're a team. We've always been a team." The crystal formation pulsed one more time, and the vision began to fade. The grass disappeared, the blue sky melted away, and Sarah was left staring at glowing crystal in the darkness of the ocean floor. But she had seen them. She had talked to her brother. She knew, finally and forever, that the Crimson Hawks were alive, playing eternal baseball in a place where time stood still and love was stronger than physics. As Sarah and Commander Morrison ascended toward the Hidi surface, Sarah's heart was full of joy and sadness in equal measure. She had found her brother, but bringing him home would mean asking him to give up paradise. The greatest rescue mission in history was about to become the most difficult choice any family had ever faced. October 2000, 3 days after the discovery. Elena Brennan stood on the deck of the USS Discovery, her gray hair whipping in the ocean breeze. At 67, she had never been on a ship before. But when Agent Chen called to tell her they had found Tommy, nothing could have kept her on dry land. "Are you sure it was really him?" she asked Sarah for the 10th time. "After 19 years, are you absolutely certain?" "Mrs. Brennan, I spoke with him face to face. He's exactly the same as when he left. Still 14, still the team captain, still the boy who promised to come home to you." Elena's hands shook as she gripped the ship's railing. Around her, the other families gathered on the deck, all of them struggling to understand what they had been told. Miguel's parents, Roberto and Maria, had driven up from different cities, their divorce forgotten in the face of this impossible news. Little Robbie's mother, Carmen Martinez, clutched a photo of her son and wept quietly. Commander Morrison had set up a special communication system over the crystal formation. Underwater cameras and speakers would allow the families to see and talk to their sons. But Dr. Warren, the quantum physicist who had flown in from MIT, warned them that the connection was fragile. "The barrier between their world and ours is like a soap bubble," Dr. Warren explained. "We can look through it and speak through it, but if we push too hard, it might burst. And we don't know what would happen to the boys if it did." Charles Whitmore sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the group. The 70-year-old businessman had suffered a heart attack when Agent Chen told him the boys were alive. Now, pale and weak but determined, he had insisted on being brought to the ship. "This is my fault," he kept saying. "If I hadn't offered them that plane ride, they never would have disappeared." "Mr. Whitmore," Elena said gently, "if you hadn't offered them that ride, they might never have found their way to paradise. Maybe this was always meant to happen." Agent Chen activated the communication system, and suddenly, the families could see their sons through the crystal barrier. The deck of the ship fell silent, except for the sound of parents weeping with joy and disbelief. Tommy Brennan stepped up to the barrier first, pressing his hand against the crystal. He looked exactly as he had 19 years ago, down to the small scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at age 12. "Mom?" Tommy's voice came through the speakers, clear and strong. "Mom? Is that really you?" Elena rushed to the monitor, pressing her hands against the screen. "Tommy, oh my baby, I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too, Mom. I've thought about you every single day. How's Maria? Is she still little?" Elena laughed through her tears. "Maria is 19 now, Tommy. She's in college. She's grown up hearing stories about her big brother, waiting to meet you." Tommy's face showed confusion and sadness. 19, but it feels like we just left. Time works differently here, Mom. A day feels like a year sometimes, and a year feels like a minute. Miguel Santos appeared next to Tommy. "Papa? Mama? You're both here." Roberto and Maria Santos stood together, holding hands for the first time in 10 years. "Miguel, mijo, we're here. We're both here." "I'm sorry about the divorce," Miguel said, somehow knowing what had happened. "We can see your world sometimes, like watching a movie. I saw you both crying, and I wanted to come home and fix it." "You did fix it," Maria said. "Finding out you're alive has brought us back together. We remarried last month, Miguel. We're a family again." One by one, the boys talked to their families. Little Robbie Martinez, still 10 years old, cried when he saw how much his parents had aged. Billy Crawford was amazed to learn he had a sister who was now older than he was. Kevin Walsh asked about every neighbor and friend he remembered from Millbrook. But it was Timmy Chen's conversation with his sister Sarah that broke everyone's heart. "Sarah, you became an FBI agent like you always wanted," Timmy said proudly. "I knew you would. You were always the smartest person I knew. I became an agent to find you, Timmy. I never gave up looking. I know. We could feel your love reaching us across the worlds. It's part of what kept us safe all these years. Timmy, I need to ask you something important. Do you want to come home? All of you?" The boys looked at each other, and suddenly their joy became mixed with uncertainty. "Coach." Rodriguez stepped into view, still 28 years old, still the man who had taught them that. Baseball was about more than winning. "Agent Chen, we've talked about this every day for 19 years, Coach Rodriguez said. "We love our families more than words can say, but coming home means growing up. It means becoming adults and losing this perfect world where we can play baseball forever." "But Coach," Elena called out, "growing up isn't so bad. You get to fall in love, have children of your own, experience things that are even more wonderful than baseball." "I know, Mrs. Brennan, but you also get hurt. People you love die. Dreams don't always come true. Here, we never have to face any of that. We can stay children forever, playing the game. We love with friends who will never leave us." Tommy looked directly at his mother. "Mom, if we come home, we'll be 33 years old. I'll be older than you were when I left. We'll have missed our whole childhood with you, and you'll have missed watching us grow up." "I don't care how old you are, Tommy," Elena said firmly. "I just want you home. I want to hug you and cook your favorite meals and argue with you about cleaning your room. I want to meet the man you've become, not just remember the boy you were. But what if the man I become disappoints you? What if I can't live up to the memory of the perfect son you've carried all these years?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but strong. Tommy, I didn't fall in love with a perfect boy. I fell in love with my son, the real you, the one who forgot to take out the trash and left his socks on the floor and cried when he struck out in important games. I want all of you back, not just the good parts. Around the deck, other parents were having similar conversations with their sons. Some begged them to come home. Others, seeing how happy their boys were, told them to stay in paradise if that's what they wanted. Miguel's grandmother, now 92 and brought to the ship in a wheelchair, spoke in Spanish to her grandson. Mijo, happiness that comes from hiding from life is not real happiness. Real happiness comes from choosing love even when it's hard, even when it hurts. The boys huddled together in their perfect world, talking quietly among themselves. Finally, Tommy stepped forward as their captain one last time. We need time to decide, he said. This is the biggest choice we'll ever make. Can you give us until tomorrow? Of course, Agent Chen said. But boys, remember something. Whatever you choose, your families will love you. If you stay, they'll be sad, but they'll understand. If you come home, they'll welcome you with open arms. Love doesn't have conditions. As the families prepared to return to shore for the night, Elena looked one more time at her son through the crystal barrier. Tommy, whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. You've taken care of your team for 19 years. You've kept them safe and happy. You've been the leader I always knew you could be. If staying makes you happy, then stay. But if there's any part of you that wants to come home, know that we'll be here waiting. That night, as the ship anchored over the crystal formation, 12 boys who had been children for 19 years faced the hardest decision of their lives. In the morning, they would choose between perfect happiness and imperfect love, between eternal childhood and uncertain adulthood, between paradise and home. The greatest choice in the history of family was about to be made by children who had learned that sometimes growing up means choosing what's right over what's easy. October 15th, 2000, dawn. In their perfect world beyond the crystal barrier, the Crimson Hawks sat in a circle on the emerald grass of their eternal baseball field. For the first time in 19 years, they weren't playing. They were talking about the hardest decision any children had ever faced. I keep thinking about my mom, Tommy Brennan said, tossing a baseball from hand to hand. She looked so old yesterday, so tired. I caused that. We all did, Miguel Santos replied. My parents got divorced because of us. They spent years blaming each other for letting me go on that plane. Little Robbie Martinez, still 10 years old, looked around at the perfect world they had called home. But if we go back, we'll never see this place again. We'll never play with Babe Ruth's team or catch fly balls that turn into butterflies. We'll never have another perfect game. Coach Rodriguez sat with them, his young face serious. Boys, I've been thinking about something all night. Do you remember what I taught you about baseball when we first started playing together? That it's not about winning, said Kevin Walsh. That teammates take care of each other, added Sean Murphy. That every game has to end, finished Andy Foster, his stutter completely gone in this magical place. That's right, Coach Rodriguez nodded. Every game has to end, Andy. That's what makes each moment precious. That's what makes hitting a home run or making a great catch special. If the game never ended, would those moments mean as much? Marcus Johnson, the quiet strategist, spoke up. Coach, are you saying we should go home? I'm saying we should think about why we're really here. We came here because we loved baseball so much that we couldn't bear the thought of it ending. But maybe we've learned something in 19 years. Maybe we've learned that the game isn't the most important thing. Tommy stood up and walked to the edge of their world, where he could see the crystal barrier that separated them from the ocean above. Through the shimmering wall, he could just make out the lights of the ship where their families waited. I've been the captain of this team for 19 years, Tommy said. I've tried to take care of all of you, to make sure we stayed together and stayed happy. But yesterday, when I saw my mom, I realized something. She's been taking care of me all this time, even when I wasn't there. She's been keeping my room ready, setting my place at dinner, never giving up hope. Who's been taking care of her? Timmy Chen looked up from the statistics notebook he always carried. My sister Sarah became an FBI agent just to find us. She spent her whole career looking for missing children because she couldn't find her missing brother. We didn't just disappear from the world, we changed it. My little sister Jennifer grew up thinking she could never be as good as me, said Billy Crawford. But she didn't even know me. She only knew the perfect memory everyone had of me. That's not fair to her. One by one, the boys began to realize that their families had been paying a price for their perfect happiness. Their parents had grown old waiting for them. Their siblings had lived their entire lives in the shadow of the missing brothers they had never known. But what if we go back and we're not who they remember? Asked Joey Palmer, the team clown who had kept their spirits up for 19 years. What if we disappoint them? What if we can't be the sons they've dreamed about all this time? Joey, said Luke Harrison, the rich kid who had found his real family with the Hawks. My parents told me something yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. They said they didn't want the perfect son they remembered. They wanted the real son, with all his mistakes and problems. They wanted to argue with me about homework and worry about me staying out too late. They wanted all the messy, difficult, wonderful parts of having a real family. Alex Rivera, the youngest member besides Robbie, spoke quietly. I've been 10 years old for 19 years. I want to know what it feels like to be 11 and 12 and 13. I want to learn to drive a car and go on dates and maybe have kids of my own someday. I want to grow up. Coach Rodriguez smiled sadly. Boys, I think you've already grown up. You've learned the most important lesson there is. You've learned that love is more important than happiness. That taking care of the people who love you matters more than protecting yourselves from pain. The boys looked at each other, and without speaking, they all knew what their decision was. They had been a team for 19 years, and they would make this choice as a team. All in favor of going home? Tommy asked, raising his hand. 12. Hands went up. Coach Rodriguez raised his hand too. It's unanimous, Tommy said. We're going home. As they stood to walk toward the crystal barrier, their perfect world began to change. The eternal sunshine grew softer. The grass beneath their feet felt less solid. The baseball field that had been their paradise for 19 years was starting to fade. Wait, said little Robbie, his voice shaking. I'm scared. What if we grow up and forget this place? What if we forget how perfect it was? Coach Rodriguez put his hand on Robbie's shoulder. We won't forget, son. This place will always be part of us. But now we get to take what we learned here and share it with the world. We get to teach other children that magic is real, that dreams can come true, and that love is the most powerful force in the universe. They walked together toward the barrier, their red Crimson Hawks uniforms bright against the fading paradise. As they approached the crystal wall, it began to glow brighter and brighter, until the light was almost too bright to look at. On the ship above, Agent Sarah Chen watched her instruments go crazy as massive energy readings spiked across all her screens. Commander Morrison, something's happening down there. The families rushed to the deck just as the ocean began to glow with the same blue light. Martha. Hendricks had seen 19 years ago. The water started to swirl, gently at first, then faster and faster, until a perfect circle of light formed on the surface. And then, impossibly, they began to rise from the water. Not as the children who had disappeared in 1981, but as the men they had become. Tommy. Brennan, now 33, broke the surface first, gasping and treading water. Miguel Santos, 32, emerged beside him. One by one, All 12 players and their coach rose from the glowing ocean, transformed by their choice from eternal children into the adults they had chosen to become. Elena Brennan screamed with joy as rescue boats pulled her son from the water. But the man they lifted onto the deck wasn't the 14-year-old boy she remembered. He was tall and strong, with lines around his eyes and gray in his hair. He had the face of a man who had lived through impossible things and chose love over fear. "Mom," Tommy said, his voice deeper now, but still unmistakably her son's. Elena threw her arms around him, and for the first time in 19 years, she held her boy. "I don't care how old you are," she sobbed. "You're still my Tommy. You're still my son." All around the deck, families reunited with sons who had aged 19 years in the space of a heartbeat. But the love in their eyes hadn't aged at all. It was as fresh and strong as it had been the day they said goodbye. Agent Sarah Chen found herself face to face with a 32-year-old man who had her brother's gentle eyes and kind smile. "Sarah," Timmy said, pulling her into a hug. "Thank you for never giving up on us. Thank you for bringing us home." As the sun rose over the Atlantic Ocean, the greatest mystery in sports history was finally solved. The Crimson Hawks had chosen love over paradise, family over perfection, and the difficult beauty of real life over the easy happiness of eternal childhood. They were home. Millbrook, Ohio, November 2000. Tommy Brennan stood in his childhood bedroom, staring at the bed that had been made fresh every week for 19 years. The room looked exactly the same as when he was 14, but now he was a 33-year-old man who had to duck to avoid hitting his head on the baseball pennants hanging from the ceiling. "It feels like visiting a museum of my own life," he told his mother, Elena, who sat on the bed, watching him with tears of joy in her eyes. "I kept everything exactly as you left it," she said. "Your clothes, your baseball cards, even that half-finished model airplane on your desk. I dusted it every week and told myself you'd come home to finish it." Tommy picked up the plastic model, remembering the day he'd started building it. He had been so excited about the national tournament that he'd left it unfinished, planning to work on it when he got back from Florida. Now, 19 years later, his adult hands could barely fit the tiny pieces together. "Mom, I want to finish it," he said, "but I think I need bigger pieces now." Elena laughed, the first real laugh she'd had in decades. "We'll figure it out together, son. We have time now, all the time in the world." Across town, Miguel Santos sat at his parents' kitchen table, amazed to see his father and mother holding hands like newlyweds. Roberto and Maria had remarried the month before, but seeing their adult son made their reunion feel complete. "Tell us about the place you were," Maria asked. "Was it really paradise?" Miguel thought carefully before answering. "It was perfect, Mama. We never got hurt, never got tired, never had to worry about anything. But you know what was missing?" "What, mijo?" "Birthdays. We never got to celebrate. Birthdays or Christmas or any of the little things that make life special. We had one perfect day that lasted 19 years, but we missed 19 years of real days with real surprises and real love." Agent Sarah Chen helped her brother Timmy move into the small apartment she had rented for him near her house. 32, Timmy was still gentle and thoughtful, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen impossible things. "Sarah, I want you to know something," Timmy said as they unpacked boxes of new clothes. "In that other place, we could see your world sometimes like watching through windows. I saw you working on cases, helping other families find their missing children. You turned your pain into purpose. You became the sister I always knew you could be. I became an FBI agent to find you, Timmy. Now that you're home, I don't know what my purpose is anymore." Timmy smiled. "Your purpose is the same as it always was. Help people, solve mysteries, keep families together. The only difference is, now you know that some mysteries have impossible answers, and that's okay." The reunion hadn't been easy for everyone. Billy Crawford had struggled the most with adjustment. His sister Jennifer, now 31, had lived her entire life feeling overshadowed by her missing brother. When Billy returned as a 31-year-old man himself, she didn't know how to relate to him. "I spent my whole childhood trying to be as good as the perfect brother I never knew," Jennifer told him during their first real conversation. "Now, I find out you weren't perfect at all. You were just a regular kid who happened to disappear." "I was never perfect, Jen," Billy said. "I was small and scared, and I cried when I struck out in important games. I spent 19 years in a place where I never had to face failure or disappointment. But you lived in the real world. You dealt with real problems. You're stronger than I ever was." Little Robbie Martinez, now 29, had perhaps the hardest adjustment of all. His parents, Carmen and Luis, had divorced 10 years after his disappearance, and both had remarried. He suddenly had 4 parents and 3 half-siblings he had never met. "I know this is confusing," his father, Luis, told him. "We all tried to move on with our lives, but we never stopped loving you or hoping you'd come home." "I understand, Papa," Robbie said. "You had to live your lives. I'm just grateful I get to be part of them now." The entire town of Millbrook struggled to adjust to the return of their local legends. The Crimson Hawks had become symbols of hope and loss, and now they were just regular men trying to figure out how to live in a world that had moved on without them. Coach Danny Rodriguez, now 47 but looking like he had aged naturally, started working with the current youth baseball team. But instead of focusing on winning, he taught the children about the magic of playing together, of supporting each other, and of finding joy in every moment of the game. "Baseball isn't about being the best," he told his new players. "It's about being your best together. It's about learning that sometimes the most important victories happen off the field." Charles Whitmore emerged from his 19-year isolation like a man awakening from a long sleep. Seeing the boys return, as healthy adults lifted the crushing guilt that had consumed him for so long. He sold his mansion and used the money to create the Crimson Hawks Foundation, which helped families of missing children and funded youth baseball programs for underprivileged kids. "Those boys gave me back my life," he told reporters. "The least I can do is give other children the chance to play the game they love." The media attention was overwhelming at first. The story of the missing baseball team that returned as adults captured the world's imagination. But the former Hawks handled the spotlight with grace, always emphasizing that their story was about family love, not about them. "We're not heroes," Tommy told a national television interviewer. "We're just sons who learned that no paradise is worth missing the chance to grow old with the people who love you." The men struggled with practical challenges too. They had no social security numbers for their adult years, no educational records. Beyond middle school, no work experience in the normal world. But the community of Millbrook rallied around them, helping them get identification, find jobs, and adjust to adult life. Miguel used his speed and natural athleticism to become a youth track coach. Marcus, the former strategist, discovered he had a gift for computer programming. Andy Foster, whose stutter had returned in the real world, became a speech therapist who specialized in helping children overcome communication difficulties. Kevin Walsh opened a sporting goods store that became the heart of the community. Sean Murphy worked construction, using his gentle strength to build homes for families. Joey Palmer became a teacher who could make any subject fun for his students. Luke Harrison reconnected with his wealthy family, but chose to work as a social worker, helping children from difficult backgrounds. Alex Rivera, the youngest, enrolled in college to study engineering, amazed by how much technology had advanced during their absence. And Timmy Chen became a statistician for a Major League Baseball team, combining his love of numbers with his love of the game that had defined his life. But the most important adjustment was learning to be family members again. Tommy had to learn how to be a brother to Maria, his 19-year-old sister who was now younger than him. Miguel had to adjust to having parents who looked older than he remembered but loved him just as much. The hardest part, Robbie confided to his teammates during one of their weekly dinners together, is knowing that they aged while we stayed young. They spent 19 years missing us, but we only spent 19 years missing one day with them. But look what they did with those 19 years, Tommy replied. They became stronger. They learned to hope without guarantee. They chose to, love us even when it hurt. We may have found paradise, but they found something even more valuable. They found faith. As winter approached, the 12 men who had once been the Crimson Hawks settled into their new lives. They remained close, meeting every week to talk about their adjustment and to support each other through the challenges of starting over as adults. But they also began to understand that their experience had given them something precious to share with the world. They had learned that love transcends time, that family bonds are stronger than any magic, and that choosing to grow up and face life's challenges together is the greatest victory of all. They were no longer the boys who had captured a town's heart with their baseball skills. They were men who had captured the world's imagination with their choice to come home. And in learning to be human again, they had taught everyone around them what it truly meant to live. August 15th, 2001, 20 years after the disappearance. Morning sun cast long shadows across Crimson Hawks Memorial Field as the town of Millbrook prepared for the most important baseball game in its history. Today marked exactly 20 years since 12 boys and their coach had vanished into a blue light over the Atlantic Ocean. But instead of a memorial service, the town was celebrating a homecoming. Tommy Brennan stood at home plate, wearing his CE old red uniform that Elena had carefully let out to fit his 34-year-old body. The fabric was the same, but the man inside it had changed in ways that went far beyond size. His hair had touches of gray now, and there were lines around his eyes from learning to laugh at life's imperfections. "Ready for this, Captain?" "Miguel," Santos asked, jogging up to the plate. At 33, Miguel still moved with the grace of the fastest runner in 3 counties, but now he carried himself with the wisdom of someone who had chosen real life over endless youth. "I've been ready for 20 years, Tommy grinned. "Though I have to admit, my knees feel a lot different than they did when we were kids." The opposing team was made up of the current Millbrook youth baseball players, ages 10 to 14. They wore brand new uniforms and looked at the returned Crimson Hawks with a mixture of awe and excitement. To them, these men were living legends who had somehow stepped out of a fairy tale. In the stands, Elena Brennan sat next to her daughter Maria, who was now 20. Maria had Tommy's dark eyes and their mother's stubborn determination. She had grown up hearing stories about her big brother and had dreamed of this moment her entire life. "Are you nervous about playing against your brother?" Elena asked. "A little," Maria admitted. She was the starting pitcher for the youth team, the first girl ever to make the Millbrook squad. But Tommy taught me something important last week. He said the score doesn't matter. What matters is that we're all here, playing together. Across the field, Agent Sarah Chen sat with her parents, who looked older but happier than they had in decades. Timmy waved at them from first base, where he was coaching the young players. At 33, he had become one of the most patient and encouraging coaches anyone had ever seen. "I still can't believe he's really home," Sarah's mother whispered, tears in her eyes. "Believe it, Mom," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. "And believe that miracles happen when people never stop loving each other." Coach Danny Rodriguez, now 48, stood in the dugout with both teams. Before the game began, he had something important to say. "Players, families, friends," he called out, his voice carrying across the packed field. 20 years ago, 12 boys and I left this field to chase a dream. We found something more amazing than any of us could have imagined. We found a place where childhood could last forever, where every game was perfect, and where we never had to face disappointment or loss. The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. But we also learned something even more important. We learned that perfection isn't the point of life. Love is the point. Growing together is the point. Choosing to face tomorrow as a team, even when tomorrow is uncertain, is the point. He gestured to the young players around him. These kids are going to strike out sometimes. They're going to make errors and lose games and have their hearts broken. And that's not a failure. That's life. That's what makes every hit, every catch, every moment of joy precious. The crowd erupted in applause as both teams took the field. The game itself was everything a baseball game should be: joyful, unpredictable, and full of surprises. In the third inning, little Bobby Chen, no relation to Timmy but wearing his number in honor, hit his first home run and ran the bases with tears of joy streaming down his face. The entire crowd stood and cheered, including Timmy, who clapped so hard his hands hurt. In the fifth inning, Maria Brennan struck out her own brother with a curveball that would have made any major league scout proud. As Tommy walked back to Cody, the dugout, he stopped at the pitcher's mound and hugged his sister. "That was a beautiful pitch, Maria. I'm proud of you." "I learned from the best," she replied. "You've been teaching me in the backyard every night since you came home." In the seventh inning, Andy Foster, whose stutter had become part of his charm rather than his shame, coached a young player through a difficult at-bat. "It's okay to be nervous," he told the boy. "Just to remember to breathe and have fun." The boy got a hit and ran to first base with a huge smile. Andy felt his heart fill with joy in a way that no perfect game in paradise ever could. As the game continued, something magical happened. The boundary between the two teams began to blur. Older players helped younger ones. Younger players cheered for older ones. The score became less important than the simple joy of playing together. In the stands, Charles Whitmore watched with tears in his eyes. The 71-year-old businessman had spent the past year working with the Crimson Hawks Foundation, helping other families of missing children. The guilt that had consumed him for 20 years had transformed into purpose. "They saved my life," he told the reporter sitting next to him. "When those boys chose to come home, they taught me that love is more powerful than regret. Now I get to help other families find their way home too." As the sun began to set, the game entered its final inning. The score was tied 7-7, but nobody really cared. This wasn't about winning or losing. This was about celebration, family, and the miracle of being together. Tommy stepped up to bat one last time, facing his sister Maria on the pitcher's mound. The crowd fell silent, sensing the importance of the moment. Maria wound up and threw her best fastball. Tommy swung and connected, sending the ball high into the evening sky. For a moment, it seemed to hang there, silhouetted against the orange and pink sunset. The ball came down in the outfield, where young Alex Rivera Jr., named after one of the original Hawks, caught it with the grace of a future star. The game was over, but nobody moved. Nobody wanted this perfect moment to end. Both teams came together at the pitcher's mound, just as they had planned. The original Crimson Hawks stood with their arms around the shoulders of the young players, forming a circle that connected past and present, memory and hope. "Thank you," Tommy said to the young team. "Thank you for reminding us why we fell in love with this game in the first place." As the crowd began to head home under the stars, Elena Brennan walked onto the field to meet her son. Tommy was picking up the bases, just as he had done as a 14-year-old 20 years earlier. "Some things never change," Elena said with a smile. "The important things don't," Tommy replied, giving his mother a hug. "Love doesn't change. Family doesn't change. The magic of playing ball with people you care about doesn't change." Agent Sarah Chen found her brother Timmy, helping the young players put away the equipment. She had something to tell him that she'd been saving for this moment. "Timmy, I've been thinking about what you said about my purpose. You're right that it's still helping families. But I've decided to retire from the FBI. I want to work with Charles Whitmore's foundation, helping other families of missing children. Our story proves that miracles are possible. Maybe I can help other people never give up hope. Timmy smiled. That sounds perfect, Sarah. And who knows? Maybe some of those children will find their way home from impossible places too. As the last of the crowd headed home, the 12 men who had once been the Crimson Hawks walked together. Across the field they had left as boys 20 years earlier. They had returned as men who understood that the greatest victory wasn't avoiding life's challenges, but choosing to face them together. In the quiet evening air, as fireflies began to dance above the grass, a gentle breeze stirred the flag that flew over the memorial field. For just a moment, the wind seemed to carry the sound of children laughing and playing ball. But when they turned to look, there was nothing there but memories and love, and the promise of tomorrow. The story of the Crimson Hawks was finally complete. It had begun with 12 boys who loved baseball so much they couldn't bear for the game to end. It concluded with 12 men who loved their families so much they chose to let their childhood end so that real life could begin. And in the end, that choice, to love more than they feared, to hope more than they doubted, to choose growth over safety, had been the greatest game-winning hit of all. As Tommy Brennan walked home with his arm around his mother's shoulders, he looked up at the stars and whispered a quiet thank you to the magical place that had taught him what really mattered. Then he looked ahead to tomorrow, ready to face whatever came next with the team that had never really left his side, his family, his friends, and the unshakable belief that love was stronger than any mystery the universe could devise. The game was over. The team was home, and the greatest victory of all was just beginning. The Crimson Hawks chose love over paradise, family over perfection. They proved that sometimes the greatest victory is coming home to the people who never stopped believing in you. Where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I love connecting with our amazing community around the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button to help us spread these inspiring tales to more people. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell. We share stories of the hope, mystery, and the power of love every week. Together, we can spread kindness, one story at a time. There's another incredible story waiting for you right now. Click on the video appearing on your screen. You won't want to miss what happens next. Until next time, keep believing in miracles.